You think you've seen HOA drama? Think again. When one neighborhood, Karen, decided to report my wife for impersonating a federal officer, she thought she'd finally caught us breaking HOA rules. But what she didn't know was that my wife's badge wasn't fake, it was 100% real. And it changed everything. Our neighborhood wasn't a peaceful one, not since the HOA's self-appointed queen, Karen Mitchell, took over. She wasn't the official president, but she might as well have been. She had her hands in every complaint, every parking fine, every yard violation notice. To her, control wasn't a duty, it was a lifestyle. Every morning, Karen patrolled the cul-de-sac like a hawk. Coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, she made sure no mailbox was unpainted, no fence was unapproved, and no vehicle dared touch the sacred curb for more than 12 hours. To most, she was just annoying. To us, she was something worse, obsessed. My wife, Jenna, and I had moved into the neighborhood 6 months earlier. We were quiet, kept our lawn trimmed, and stayed out of drama. But peace never lasts when there's a Karen around. It started small, a passive-aggressive note about our recycling bin being visible from the street. Then another about unsanctioned Christmas lights. Each time, Jenna would smile it off, throw the notice away, and say, "Let her be. She's harmless." But she wasn't. It was the 4th week of spring when Karen found a new reason to hate us. One morning, she saw Jenna leaving the house in her dark navy uniform, the kind that carried authority even without a word. The badge on her chest gleamed under the sun, the federal insignia polished to perfection. Karen, sipping her coffee behind the blinds, nearly choked on her own superiority. In her mind, this was it, the jackpot of HOA drama. Because how dare someone in her neighborhood pretend to be an officer? By the time Jenna came home that evening, there were 3 HOA violation letters taped to our front door. Unauthorized uniform in public, creating a false image of authority, and misrepresentation of law enforcement. None of these were actual HOA rules, Karen had written them herself, in bold red ink. That night, I found Karen pacing outside our driveway, her phone in hand, muttering something about fraudulent behavior. I ignored her, assuming she'd get bored. But Karen never got bored. She got dangerous. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into our driveway. Jenna was in the passenger seat, returning from work, exhausted but smiling. She stepped out, said goodbye to her partner, and waved as the car rolled away. Within seconds, Karen came storming out of her house, phone raised, filming. Her voice carried across the street, though I'll spare you the words. She accused Jenna of impersonating a federal officer, of faking a government car, and even threatened to report her to the FBI. Neighbors peeked out from windows. Karen was in her element, loud, righteous, and absolutely wrong. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jenna was a federal officer. Her badge wasn't a prop. It was real, issued by the Department of Homeland Security. And the black SUV she stepped out of wasn't some costume accessory, it was a government vehicle on official assignment. Still, Jenna stayed calm. She walked inside without a word, locked the door, and sat down with a sigh. "She's crossing the line," I said, but Jenna shook her head. "Let her," she replied. "She'll find out soon enough." That night, Karen made the call. She dialed 911 and reported my wife for impersonating a federal officer. She gave them our address, described Jenna in detail, and even claimed she had video evidence. And by morning, our quiet suburban street would be swarming with real law enforcement, something Karen thought would humiliate us forever. But she was about to learn the hard way that calling the cops on a real federal agent doesn't go how you imagine. And that's where the real story begins. The morning sun hadn't fully broken through the clouds when the first police cruiser arrived. Blue and red lights flickered across the sleepy cul-de-sac, casting their colors on driveways, garage doors, and half-drawn curtains. One by one, blinds lifted, and doors cracked open. The neighbors came out quietly, coffee mugs in hand, drawn by the flashing lights and the unspoken thrill of suburban chaos. Karen stood on her front porch in a bright pink robe, clutching her phone like a trophy. Her lips curled in satisfaction as she waved the officers toward our house. This was her moment. The self-proclaimed queen of the HOA was about to watch her criminal neighbors face justice, or so she thought. Inside, Jenna was already awake. She had noticed the cars before I did. Calmly, she sipped her coffee, eyes fixed on the window. She didn't panic, didn't rush to hide her badge, didn't even flinch. It was a look I'd seen before, the look of someone trained to face pressure head-on. The knock came, sharp, firm, authoritative. It echoed through the living room like a countdown. I walked to the door, heart pounding, half expecting an arrest warrant, half expecting an explanation. But when I opened it, what I saw wasn't hostility, it was confusion. The officers looked tense, but not aggressive. They were professionals doing their job, responding to a call they clearly didn't understand. Behind them, Karen was already narrating her own fantasy version of events to a group of neighbors gathering near her mailbox. She pointed toward our house dramatically, describing how she'd caught Jenna pretending to be an officer, using a fake badge, and driving a government SUV. Her words were fast, rehearsed, dripping with arrogance. Inside, Jenna quietly opened a drawer and retrieved her identification wallet. 2 badges gleamed under the morning light, one metal, one laminated, both unmistakably real. When she stepped forward, the energy shifted instantly. The officers straightened up. Their expressions changed from suspicion to respect. One of them took her credentials gently, inspecting the federal seal, the embedded hologram, the engraved signature. He nodded slowly, almost apologetically. Karen, still narrating from across the lawn, couldn't see their faces. She kept talking louder, desperate to maintain control of her crumbling story. "She's lying," she called out. "I've seen her. She wears the uniform just to scare people. That's not even a real agency." But the officers didn't move toward Jenna anymore. Instead, they turned toward Karen. It started to dawn on her when they walked across the street. Her confident posture stiffened, her voice trembled slightly, and for the first time in years, she looked unsure. One of the officers asked her a few quiet questions. The color drained from her face. No one knew exactly what was said, but word travels fast in small neighborhoods. Within minutes, the entire cul-de-sac understood the truth. Jenna wasn't pretending. She was a real federal officer, one who worked joint cases with Homeland Security and state police. The silence that followed was almost cinematic. Karen retreated back into her house, blinds snapping shut behind her like a fortress slamming its gates. The police apologized for the misunderstanding, but Jenna brushed it off with professional composure. "You're just doing your job," she told them. They left soon after, leaving behind an invisible tension that clung to the air long after the lights stopped flashing. For the rest of that day, the street was unnaturally quiet. No kids playing. No lawnmowers buzzing. Just whispers. Neighbors avoided eye contact, embarrassed to have believed Karen's story so easily. By evening, a new kind of unease settled in. Jenna went about her evening routine, unaffected, but I could tell she sensed what was coming. Karen wasn't the type to surrender. Public humiliation would only make her more dangerous. And sure enough, just after sunset, her next move came to life. She posted a lengthy rant on the HOA Facebook group, accusing Jenna of intimidating the community, using her position to manipulate law enforcement, and violating HOA ethics standards. She even attached blurry screenshots of Jenna in her uniform, claiming they were proof of impersonation. It spread fast. Within an hour, dozens of comments appeared, some defending Karen, others mocking her. But all of them kept the fire alive. Jenna read the post once, quietly, then turned off her phone. "It's not over yet," she said softly, almost like a prediction. That night, long after midnight, we noticed headlights outside. Karen was back on patrol, walking up and down the street with her flashlight, taking photos of our house, our driveway, our mailbox, anything she could use to fuel her obsession. She didn't realize that one of the neighbors, fed up with her antics, was recording everything. And that footage would soon turn the tables completely. The next day would not only expose Karen's lies, it would destroy her credibility in ways she never saw coming. By the time the weekend arrived, the neighborhood was buzzing, not with lawnmowers or backyard barbecues, but with gossip. Every porch, every driveway conversation revolved around the same topic: Karen Mitchell and the federal officer she tried to expose. Screenshots from the HOA Facebook group had spread like wildfire. Half the residents were laughing, the other half were stunned, and Karen, well, she was fighting for her reputation with the same ferocity she once reserved for grass height violations. But this time, she was losing control. The final blow came on Sunday afternoon when a quiet neighbor named Paul uploaded a short, unedited video. It showed Karen pacing in front of our house at 1:47 a.m., phone flashlight flickering, snapping photos of our windows and whispering into her phone. Her words were faint but audible: "I'll prove she's lying. I'll get her fired if it's the last thing I do." Within minutes, the video went viral, at least, as viral as something can go in a gated suburban community. The comment section exploded. "This is harassment. Someone needs to stop her. That's actually illegal." By Monday morning, the HOA inbox was flooded. So, the board called an emergency meeting. The meeting was set for 6 p.m. in the neighborhood clubhouse, a beige, overly air-conditioned space with stiff chairs and fluorescent lights. By 5:45, nearly everyone had arrived. Neighbors packed the room, whispering and glancing nervously toward the front where Karen sat at the head of the table, trying to look composed. Her clipboard rested beside a stack of printed screenshots, but her hands fidgeted restlessly. The HOA president, an older man named Greg, looked exhausted. He wasn't fond of conflict, but this one couldn't be ignored. The moment he began the session, all eyes turned toward Jenna and me, sitting quietly in the back. Greg cleared his throat and started reading from a prepared statement. He mentioned community concerns, allegations of harassment, and the importance of factual integrity. Karen interrupted within 30 seconds. She launched into a tirade, no microphone, no pause, just raw, desperate energy. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from a fraud, insisting that Jenna's badge was a clever forgery. She waved her phone in the air, citing her evidence and demanding the HOA take disciplinary action. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some neighbors looked down, others exchanged silent glances. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone knew what it showed. But Karen was too far gone to realize how delusional she sounded. Greg tried to calm her down, but she kept going, voice rising, hands trembling. "You're all being deceived," she shouted. "They're using that uniform to intimidate us, to make us afraid to speak up. Don't you see what's happening?" And then, as if on cue, Jenna stood up. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She simply walked to the front, opened a small leather folder, and placed her federal identification and badge on the table, right in front of Karen. The metal glinted under the harsh fluorescent light. The embossed seal was unmistakable. The room went silent. Even Karen froze. Her eyes darted from the badge to Jenna's calm face, then back again. The denial drained from her expression, replaced with something else, panic. Greg leaned forward, inspecting the credentials carefully. He nodded once, quietly, then looked up. "This is authentic," he said simply. "And this meeting is over." But it wasn't over for Karen. Not in her mind. Her face turned bright red. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair, papers scattering across the floor. "No. This isn't real. You're all falling for it," she screamed. The energy in the room changed instantly, not anger, but pity. Security was called. Karen stormed out before they arrived, slamming the clubhouse door behind her with a force that made the walls shake. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the whispers began again, low, uncertain, almost sympathetic. People weren't angry anymore. They were worried. Something about Karen's breakdown didn't just feel petty, it felt unhinged. Outside, she was pacing near her car, still muttering to herself, phone pressed to her ear. Later, we'd find out she was calling the HOA's regional office, trying to file a complaint against Greg for covering up federal fraud. That night, the board issued a formal suspension of her HOA privileges. No voting rights, no committee access, no community patrols. Her reign, after years of intimidation and control, was over. But even stripped of power, Karen couldn't stop. She doubled down. At 2 a.m., another post appeared on the HOA Facebook group. This time, it wasn't a rant, it was a claim. She accused Jenna of using her federal status to spy on residents. She suggested we were part of an undercover operation targeting homeowners for tax evasion. It was absurd. Yet, the post spread, because absurdity has a way of captivating people. By morning, someone had contacted a local news outlet. They wanted to get the story about a fake federal agent living in a suburban HOA. And when the cameras showed up, Karen finally saw what it felt like to be on the other side of the lens. The footage that followed would turn the quiet suburban street into a national headline. And for Karen, there would be no coming back. It started as a whisper in a Facebook comment thread, and by sunrise, it had exploded into a headline. Local woman accuses federal officer of impersonation in HOA dispute. The news vans arrived before breakfast. Their white sides gleamed under the morning light, with station logos plastered across them like battle flags. Tripods unfolded. Microphones clicked. The quiet suburban street, our once-forgotten cul-de-sac, had become the stage for a full-blown media circus. Neighbors stood at their driveways, trying to look casual while pretending not to watch. Some whispered to each other behind coffee cups, others filmed from their porches. Everyone wanted to see the showdown between the infamous HOA Karen and the federal officer she tried to expose. But only one person wanted the cameras there. Karen. She was ready before the first reporter even rang her doorbell. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and pearls, she greeted the cameras with the confidence of a politician. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile sharp and calculated. For years, she had ruled the neighborhood with HOA bylaws and gossip. Now, she was stepping into a bigger arena, public sympathy. She led the reporters down the driveway like a tour guide of victimhood. Her voice was measured, rehearsed, dripping with performative sincerity. She claimed she had serious concerns for community safety, that she was just doing her duty as a responsible homeowner, and that this so-called officer had used intimidation tactics to silence her. The cameras rolled. The sound bites were clean. And for a few fleeting moments, Karen looked like the hero she always wanted to be. Until Jenna stepped outside. She wasn't in uniform this time, just jeans and a plain gray sweater. No badge, no government vehicle, nothing that screamed authority. But her presence alone shifted the energy instantly. Conversation stopped. Even the reporters went quiet. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The news crew turned toward her instinctively, drawn to the contrast, the calmness versus the chaos. Karen noticed the cameras shifting, and her smile faltered. She tried to redirect their attention, raising her voice, gesturing wildly toward our house. "That's her. That's the one I told you about. Ask her why she's pretending to be an officer. Ask her who she really works for." But before anyone could, a second car pulled up. Not a police cruiser. Not a government SUV. A black sedan with tinted windows and diplomatic plates. Two plainclothes agents stepped out. They weren't here for drama. They were here because Jenna had reported Karen's harassment through official channels. And now, they were following up. The cameras swung back again, lenses zooming in as the agents approached Karen. The tone of the entire scene changed. One of them quietly identified themselves, flashing credentials. The other asked Karen to step aside to clarify a few statements she had made to media and law enforcement. The color drained from her face. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. The cameras caught every second. For the next 10 minutes, the world watched as the self-appointed HOA enforcer, the woman who claimed to have uncovered a fraud, was questioned by real federal agents on her own front lawn. Her confident posture began to crumble. The tremble in her hands betrayed her calm facade. She started backpedaling, saying she might have misunderstood, that maybe it was all a big mix-up. But it was too late. The footage captured everything, the contradictions, the excuses, the unraveling. Within hours, the story flipped. HOA resident harasses federal officer in bizarre neighborhood feud. News anchors called it one of the most ridiculous HOA confrontations ever caught on camera. Social media turned it into a meme. Screenshots of Karen's interviews spread across Reddit and TikTok, each caption more brutal than the last. And for the first time, the neighborhood didn't rally behind her. They laughed. They rolled their eyes. They shared the video links like wildfire. Years of her micromanaging, threatening fines, and writing self-made rules had finally caught up to her. But the humiliation didn't end with the broadcast. The HOA board called another emergency meeting that evening, this time, without her. They voted unanimously to remove her from all committees and permanently ban her from acting in any official capacity within the community. The motion passed in under 10 minutes. By nightfall, Karen's mailbox was filled with letters, not from lawyers or agents, but from neighbors she had once bullied. Polite but firm notes, each one saying the same thing in different words: "You went too far." She didn't come outside for days. The once dominant figure of the cul-de-sac, who used to patrol every inch of it, now watched from behind her blinds. Her porch light stayed off. Her lawn grew wild. The clipboard that was once her symbol of control lay abandoned on the porch, half buried under windblown leaves. But humiliation has a way of turning into resentment. And in Karen's mind, this wasn't over. She had lost her credibility, her position, her neighbors' respect, but in her narrative, she was still the victim. The more she stewed in her anger, the more she convinced herself that she had been framed, that Jenna had set her up with those agents, that someone had to pay for her downfall. And when someone like Karen reaches that level of obsession, they don't seek justice. They seek revenge. The next chapter in this war wouldn't involve meetings or news interviews. It would happen in the shadows, quiet acts of sabotage, anonymous complaints, and a dangerous plan that could have ruined more than just reputations. Because when Karen decided to strike back, she didn't just cross the line, she erased it completely. For a few weeks after the media storm, peace seemed to return to the neighborhood, at least on the surface. The news crews were gone, the HOA had gone quiet, and neighbors slowly resumed their morning routines. Kids rode their bikes again. Lawns were trimmed. The street almost looked normal. Almost. Behind the blinds of her dimly lit house, Karen Mitchell was unraveling. The humiliation from the news coverage had destroyed the carefully curated image she had built for years, the self-proclaimed protector of the community, the enforcer of order, the woman everyone once feared. Now, she was a punchline. A viral meme. And she couldn't stand it. Her phone had become both her weapon and her tormentor. Every scroll reminded her of what she'd lost. The HOA board had voted her out. Neighbors ignored her messages. People crossed the street to avoid her. Even the mail carrier barely made eye contact. In Karen's mind, there was only one person responsible for it all, Jenna. The woman with the badge. The one who'd made her look powerless. The one who had the whole neighborhood, the police, and now the internet on her side. So Karen did what people like her always do when cornered, she plotted. It began subtly. One morning, I found our mailbox left open, the contents damp from overnight rain. A week later, the side of Jenna's car was scratched with a deep, deliberate line. Then came the anonymous letters, no return address, just printed notes on plain paper. Fraud. We know what you did. You don't belong here. At first, we ignored them. Jenna had dealt with worse threats in her career. But this was different. It wasn't coming from some distant suspect, it was coming from 10 yards across the street. By the third week, the pattern escalated. Small piles of trash appeared on our lawn at night. Someone slashed one of our tires. And one morning, we woke up to find a "for sale" sign jammed crookedly into our yard, spray-painted with the word "leave." There was no question who was behind it. Karen's house faced ours directly. Her curtains would shift just slightly whenever we stepped outside, her phone camera always aimed, her porch light flickering on and off like a silent taunt. But the breaking point came when she crossed from harassment into something criminal. It happened on a Thursday night. Jenna was working late, reviewing case files in her home office when she noticed movement outside. Through the window, she saw a faint glow near the back fence, like the light from a phone screen. She turned off her lamp, waited, then saw it again. Someone was crouching by our gate, tampering with something. She moved fast. Quietly, she grabbed her flashlight and stepped out the back door. The air was cold, still, heavy with that uneasy silence before confrontation. She flicked the light on, and there she was. Karen. Gloves on. A screwdriver in her hand. The padlock on our back gate half broken. The beam of light froze her like a deer caught mid-crime. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Karen bolted, sprinting across her yard, stumbling over a garden hose, scrambling into her house, and slamming the door shut. Jenna stood there for a moment, breathing steady, professional instinct kicking in. She didn't yell. She didn't chase. She simply took photos, clear, time-stamped evidence, and called it in. Within 30 minutes, an unmarked car pulled up quietly at the corner. 2 officers arrived, ones who already knew the backstory. They reviewed the photos, inspected the broken lock, and exchanged looks that said everything. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was stalking, vandalism, and attempted trespassing, all documented, all traceable. When they knocked on Karen's door, she refused to open it. She shouted through the glass that she was being set up, that the federal lady was framing her again. But the officers didn't leave. They served her with a restraining order, effective immediately. For most people, that would have been the end. A warning shot loud enough to stop any further madness. But not for Karen. The next night, a string of anonymous complaints hit the HOA's email inbox. Each one came from different fake accounts, but the language was unmistakably hers, accusing Jenna of illegal surveillance, unauthorized weapon possession, and psychological intimidation. The HOA board ignored them. Then, she went further. She filed a complaint directly with the city police, using her real name, claiming Jenna was abusing her position to target innocent homeowners. She attached doctored screenshots, edited images that looked like email threats supposedly sent from Jenna's government address. But Karen had made one critical mistake: metadata. The complaint was routed straight to a cybercrimes division, one that had direct access to federal verification tools. Within hours, the investigators discovered the images were fabricated, the email timestamps mismatched, and the IP address traced back to Karen's own Wi-Fi network. It was over. The next morning, a warrant was issued. At 7:14 a.m., 3 unmarked cars arrived. This time, there were no flashing lights, no spectacle. Just quiet precision. Officers walked up her driveway calmly, knocked once, and waited. When she opened the door, still in her robe, the look on her face said it all. She wasn't angry anymore, she was broken. Neighbors watched from their windows as the woman who had ruled the cul-de-sac for years was escorted out in handcuffs. No one cheered. No one spoke. It was too surreal. The mighty HOA enforcer, silenced by her own obsession. Jenna didn't gloat. She didn't even watch. She simply sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee as the car drove away. "It's done," she said quietly, more to herself than to me. But the story wasn't finished yet. Because even after Karen's arrest, even after the evidence was laid bare, there was one last surprise waiting, something buried deep in her files that would reveal just how long she'd been planning this. And it would change how everyone saw her forever. When the squad cars left that morning, the neighborhood exhaled for the first time in months. Curtains fluttered open. People peeked out cautiously, half expecting Karen to come marching back with another clipboard and a camera. But she didn't. The street was still. Peaceful. Almost eerily so. For the first time since moving there, it felt like a normal neighborhood. But what no one realized, not yet, was that the real story wasn't over. The worst of it was still hidden, sitting quietly inside Karen's house, behind a locked office door and a password-protected computer. When the warrant was executed, investigators seized everything: her laptop, external drives, phones, and even printed binders labeled Neighborhood Watch Records. They expected to find angry emails and fake complaints. What they didn't expect was a full-blown archive. Inside that laptop was a digital footprint of obsession. Thousands of photos, every house, every car, every person who had ever annoyed her. Detailed notes on families, when they left for work, when their kids got home from school, what cars they drove, and even what groceries they carried in. It was all there, time-stamped, categorized, and disturbingly methodical. At first glance, it looked like the ramblings of a paranoid control freak. But then the files got darker. Hidden inside a folder titled HOA Official Correspondence were forged documents, fake warning letters, counterfeit HOA stationery, and even digital signatures from board members she had faked over the years. She had been issuing official fines and violations that never existed, pocketing the payments through a fake HOA PayPal account she'd created under a shell email. She had been scamming her own neighbors for years. The deeper investigators dug, the more unsettling it became. Beneath the financial fraud and fake letters lay another folder, this one encrypted. When it was finally unlocked, the contents stunned everyone. It contained personal dossiers on specific families, including ours. Photos of Jenna in uniform. Screenshots of government websites she had stalked, trying to find Jenna's name. A collection of conspiracy posts connecting our home to covert surveillance programs. It was clear that somewhere along the line, Karen's HOA crusade had morphed into a delusion, a full-blown fixation that consumed every waking moment of her life. The report concluded what many already suspected: Karen had been deteriorating mentally for years. The power she held within the HOA had fed her paranoia. Every small rule, every citation, every confrontation made her feel important, in control. But once that control was taken away, the facade cracked completely. The district attorney's office filed multiple charges: harassment, vandalism, fraud, cybercrime, and obstruction of justice. But because of her mental health evaluation, she wasn't sent to prison. Instead, she was placed in a psychiatric rehabilitation program. The HOA board held one final emergency meeting, not to discuss punishment, but prevention. Policies were rewritten. Power limits were introduced. The role of HOA officers was now overseen by an independent auditor. It took a public meltdown and a federal investigation to bring accountability to a suburban street. Jenna never spoke about it publicly. She declined interviews, ignored social media attention, and refused to monetize what others called the HOA story of the decade. For her, it wasn't entertainment. It was a reminder of how far obsession can go when power meets paranoia. Still, the aftermath lingered like a shadow. Months later, a new family moved into Karen's old house. The for sale sign came down quietly, the lawn was mowed again, and the porch lights turned back on. To the untrained eye, it looked like any other home. But sometimes, late at night, I'd see the faint glow of a phone flashlight through the curtains, and remember. Karen's story became a cautionary tale. Not just about HOA abuse, but about the hidden danger of people who crave control over others. She didn't start out evil, she started out lonely, desperate to matter. But when authority became her identity, she lost the line between rules and revenge. The neighborhood moved on, but the legend stayed. Every time a new resident asked about the old HOA lady, someone would lower their voice and say, "You mean Karen? Let's just say she picked the wrong person to mess with." And as for Jenna, she transferred to a new division not long after, away from suburban chaos and HOA politics. But her quiet presence in that street left a mark, not of intimidation, but of balance. For every bully with a clipboard, there's someone patient enough to wait for the truth to surface, and strong enough to stand calmly when it does. The cul-de-sac grew peaceful again. Kids played outside. Neighbors greeted each other. The silence wasn't tense anymore, it was earned. But sometimes, when I walk past the old HOA bulletin board, I still notice a faint scratch at the bottom corner of the frame. It reads, barely visible under the paint: "Order must be kept." A reminder of the woman who tried to control everything, and lost everything instead.